The Velcron Empire had ruled the galaxy for 200 years, and no one had ever stopped them. Their ships were massive and colored deep red like blood. They moved through space, destroying everything in their path. 43 star systems had fallen to their power, and 43 different species now served them as slaves. The Velcron were proud of their strength and believed nothing could challenge them. Commander Zethrock stood on the bridge of his flagship called Eternal Dominion. He was tall with 4 eyes and his skin was covered in thick gray scales. His mandibles clicked together as he looked at the screen in front of him. Another world was about to fall. Another species would learn to fear the Velcron name. This was just another day for him and his crew. The planet on the screen looked blue and green. It had white clouds swirling across its surface. The third planet from a yellow star that the locals called Earth. Zethrock had read the reports about this world. The species there called themselves humans. They had only recently formed one single government. Before that, they had been divided into hundreds of smaller nations that fought each other constantly. His tactical officer approached him with a data pad. The officer's name was Vrektal, and he had served under Zethrock for 30 cycles. Vrektal knew how to read the scans and give good information quickly. Vrektal spoke in their clicking language. The humans have basic nuclear weapons and some primitive energy shields. Their space presence is limited to a few stations in orbit, and some exploration vessels that barely leave their own star system. Population is approximately 8 billion individuals scattered across the planet's surface. Zethrock's mandibles clicked in amusement. 8 billion lives that had never known real war. These humans fought among themselves with their small weapons, but they had never faced an enemy from the stars. They had never seen their cities burned from orbit. They had never watched their leaders beg for mercy while their world died around them. He turned to his crew. Prepare the standard invasion protocol. We will show them our power and they will surrender within 3 days. They always do. The Velcron had perfected their method over countless invasions. First, they would destroy something important to show their strength, usually a military base or a small city. The target species would panic. Their governments would argue and fight among themselves. Fear would spread like poison through their population. Within days, they would send messages begging for peace. They would offer to serve the Velcron Empire in exchange for their lives. It happened the same way every single time. 3 Velcron cruisers broke away from the main fleet. They descended through Earth's atmosphere with their shields glowing bright against the friction. Each cruiser was 2 miles long and carried enough weapons to level a continent. The humans had nothing that could match this kind of power. The cruisers headed toward a location in the human territory called Nevada. Intelligence reports showed a major military installation there, a place called Nellis Air Force Base where the humans kept many of their fighter aircraft. It would make a perfect first target. Zethrock watched from his command chair as the cruisers reached firing position. He gave the order with a casual wave of his clawed hand. Fire. 3 beams of concentrated energy shot down from the cruisers. They were bright blue and hot enough to melt stone instantly. The beams struck the military base and everything there vanished in a flash of superheated plasma. Buildings vaporized. Aircraft melted into pools of liquid metal. Thousands of humans died in seconds. A massive crater appeared where the base had been. Now we wait for their surrender, Zethrock said. He settled back in his chair and prepared to receive the inevitable message from Earth's leaders. But the message never came. Instead, something unexpected happened. Alarms started blaring on the cruiser's bridges. The tactical displays lit up with hundreds of red warning indicators. The humans were attacking. Missiles streaked up from dozens of locations across the planet's surface. They came in waves, leaving white trails across the blue sky. Fighter jets launched from bases that had not been destroyed. They swarmed toward the 3 cruisers like angry insects. The humans were throwing everything they had at the Velcron ships. Vrektal looked at his console in surprise. Commander, the humans are engaging all 3 vessels simultaneously. They are using nuclear weapons and conventional explosives, some kind of energy weapons as well, though they are quite primitive. Zethrock was not worried. Let them waste their ammunition. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Once they realize they cannot hurt us, they will stop and surrender. The attacks continued. Missiles exploded against the cruiser's shields, creating bright flashes of light. The fighter jets fired their weapons constantly. More missiles came from ships in the ocean. Ground-based lasers tried to burn through the shield energy. The volume of fire was impressive for such a primitive species. One of the cruiser captains reported that his shields were at 90% strength. The constant bombardment was actually draining power faster than expected. Zethrock frowned. That should not be happening. These humans had crude weapons that should barely register on the shield sensors. The attacks kept coming. The humans did not slow down. They did not pause. They just kept firing and firing and firing. More jets appeared. More missiles launched. It was like trying to fight an entire hive of creatures that felt no fear. The cruiser captain reported again. Shields at 85%. Requesting permission to return fire. Zethrock's eyes narrowed. Fine. Destroy one of their cities. Something large. Make them understand what defiance costs. The cruiser turned toward a nearby human city, a place called Las Vegas where millions of humans lived. The energy beams fired and the city began to burn. Buildings collapsed. The ground itself melted. Fires spread in every direction. 2 million humans died in just a few minutes. The destruction was total and absolute. Zethrock watched the burning city on his screen. Now they will understand. Now they will fear us. Now they will surrender. But once again he was wrong. The attacks did not stop. They increased. More missiles came. More fighter jets appeared. The humans were fighting even harder than before. It was like the death of their city had made them angry instead of afraid. For the first time in his long career, Zethrock felt something strange. It was a small feeling in the back of his mind. A tiny voice that whispered a question he had never considered before. What if these humans were different? What if they did not know how to surrender? What if they would rather die fighting than live as slaves? He pushed the thought away. Impossible. Every species broke eventually. The humans would be no different. They just needed more time to understand their situation. Soon they would see that resistance was futile, and they would submit to Velcran rule. But deep in his mind, that small voice kept whispering, and for the first time in 200 years, a Velcran commander began to doubt. Admiral Jack Coleman stood deep underground in a military facility built inside Cheyenne Mountain. The screens around him showed the destruction in Nevada and the burning remains of Las Vegas. His jaw was tight, and his hands were clenched into fists. He had been in the military for 30 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. An enemy from the stars had come to Earth and killed millions of people in minutes. The emergency command center was filled with officers and technicians working at their stations. Everyone was moving quickly, but there was fear in their eyes. They had all seen what the alien ships could do. They had all watched Las Vegas die. Coleman turned to his communications officer. Get me a line to every major government on the planet. I want the Chinese, the Russians, the Europeans, everyone. We need to coordinate our response right now. The officer nodded and started making the connections. Within minutes, the screens filled with faces of military leaders and government officials from around the world. They all looked as shocked and angry as Coleman felt. President Laura Martinez appeared on the main screen. She was in the White House Situation Room and her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Admiral Coleman, what are our options? Can we fight these ships? Coleman took a deep breath. Madam President, their shields are holding against everything we have thrown at them. Our missiles barely scratch them. Our fighters cannot penetrate their defenses. Our energy weapons are too weak. But there is one thing that gives me hope. We managed to drain one of their shields down to 85%. That means they are not invincible. If we hit them hard enough and long enough, we can break through. A Chinese general spoke up from another screen. But at what cost? They destroyed Las Vegas in seconds. If we keep fighting, they will destroy more cities. More millions will die. Coleman's eyes were hard. And if we surrender, they will enslave us all. I have read the reports about the other species they conquered. The Velcran do not believe in mercy. They make slaves of everyone. Our children will grow up in chains. I would rather die fighting than let that happen. President Martinez nodded slowly. I agree. I am authorizing the use of any and all weapon systems. Every nation will contribute everything they have. Admiral Coleman, you are now in command of all Earth forces. Find a way to hurt these aliens. The meeting ended and Coleman turned to his staff. Get me every scientist and engineer who knows anything about energy shields or alien technology. I want ideas and I want them in 10 minutes. The scientists came quickly. Most of them were still in shock from the attack. They gathered around a large table in the corner of the command center. Coleman stood at the head of the table and looked at each of them. One man pushed his way to the front. His name was Dr. Henry Kim, and he worked at a research facility in California. His hair was messy and his eyes were wide with excitement or maybe fear. Coleman could not tell which. Dr. Kim spoke rapidly. I have been studying the energy signatures from the alien ships. Their shields are incredibly advanced. They can absorb and disperse energy from our weapons. That is why our missiles and lasers are not working. But I noticed something interesting. The shields are designed to stop high-energy attacks. They are not calibrated for slow-moving objects with high mass. Coleman leaned forward. Explain that in simple terms, Dr. Dr. Kim pulled out a tablet and showed them diagrams. Think of their shields like a net designed to catch bullets. It works great against things moving fast with explosive force. But what if we drop something heavy on them? Something with tremendous mass moving at a slower relative speed. The shields might not even recognize it as a threat until it is too late. A woman in a Navy uniform spoke up. Her name was Captain Lisa Monroe, and she was in charge of orbital weapon systems. Are you talking about kinetic weapons? Like the old Project Thor? Dr. Kim nodded eagerly. Exactly, we have tungsten rods in orbit. They were part of a weapons program from years ago. Each rod is 20 feet long and weighs several tons. If we drop them from orbit, they will accelerate to incredible speeds. No explosives, no energy signature, just pure kinetic force. Their shields are not designed to stop solid matter moving at orbital velocity. Coleman turned to Monroe. Do we still have those platforms? Can we use them? Monroe checked her tablet. Yes, sir. Project Thor was canceled, but the platforms were never dismantled. We have 6 platforms in orbit and each one carries 20 tungsten rods. They are old, but they should still work. Coleman felt hope for the first time since the attack began. Then let us test this theory. Target the cruiser over Nevada, the one that destroyed Las Vegas. I want every rod from every platform aimed at that ship. Fire everything we have. The orders went out across secure channels. In orbit above Earth, the old weapons platforms came to life. Systems that had been dormant for years powered up. Targeting computers calculated trajectories. The tungsten rods were released from their cradles. 20-foot-long spears of solid metal began to fall toward Earth. Gravity pulled them faster and faster. They heated up from friction with the atmosphere until they glowed red-hot. They looked like meteors streaking across the sky. The Velcron cruiser's sensors detected them, but the computer system did not recognize them as weapons. They were just chunks of metal falling from space. By the time the Velcron realized their mistake, it was too late. The first tungsten rod hit the cruiser's shield at over 7 miles per second. The shield tried to disperse the kinetic energy, but it was not designed for this kind of impact. The shield flickered. The second rod hit and the shield weakened further. The third, fourth, and fifth rods struck in rapid succession. The shield collapsed completely. The sixth rod punched through the cruiser's armor plating. Metal shrieked and tore. Internal explosions rippled through the ship. The cruiser listed to one side, trailing smoke and debris. Emergency lights flashed across its hull. In the command center, everyone watched in stunned silence. Then someone started cheering. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in celebration. They had hurt the aliens. They had proven the enemy could bleed. Coleman allowed himself a small smile. Send that data to every military force on the planet. I want more kinetic weapons in orbit within 24 hours. If we can hurt one ship, we can hurt them all. Above Earth, the damaged Velcran cruiser struggled to maintain altitude. Its captain made a decision that no Velcran captain had made in 200 years. He ordered a retreat. The cruiser turned and limped back toward space, trailing debris and atmosphere from its ruptured hull. On the Eternal Dominion, Commander Zethrock watched in disbelief as his cruiser withdrew from battle. One of his ships damaged and retreating, forced to flee by primitives who barely had spaceflight capability. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. It was happening right in front of his eyes. Brechtal approached cautiously. Commander, we are receiving a message from the humans. It is being broadcast on all frequencies. Play it, Zethrock ordered. President Martinez's voice filled the bridge. This message is for the Velcran Empire. You came to our world without invitation. You murdered our people without mercy. You tried to break our spirit with fear and destruction. But you made a mistake. You gave us a common enemy. You united our world. Now we have one message for you. Leave our system or we will send every one of your ships back to you in pieces. The transmission ended. Zethrock stood frozen. Never had a species responded with such defiance after losing millions of their people. Never had a primitive race damaged a Velcran warship. Never had he heard such absolute certainty in an enemy's voice. For the first time in his life, Commander Zethrock wondered if the Velcron Empire had finally met an enemy they could not conquer. Commander Zethrock stared at the damage reports on his screen, and his 4 eyes could not believe what they were seeing. One of his cruisers had been crippled by a species that should not have been able to hurt them at all. The humans had used simple kinetic weapons, just metal rods falling from space. It was primitive and crude, but it had worked. His shields had been designed to stop energy weapons and explosions, but not solid masses moving at incredible speeds. He turned to his science officer with rage burning in his chest. How long will it take to recalibrate all our shields to defend against these kinetic attacks? The science officer was a younger Velcron named Sorvek, who had always been good with technical problems. But now Sorvek looked nervous as he checked his calculations. Commander, it will take at least 6 days to modify the shield harmonics on each ship. The calculations are complex and we must be careful not to weaken our defenses against energy weapons while we add protection against physical projectiles. Zethrock slammed his fist on the armrest of his command chair. 6 days was too long. The humans would use that time to build more weapons and strengthen their defenses. But he could not wait. His pride would not allow it. No species had ever made the Velcron retreat, and he would not let these humans be the first. Send a message to the fleet, Zethrock ordered. I want 6 battle groups in Earth's orbit within 1 day. We will show these humans what real power looks like. We will show them what happens when someone defies the Velcron Empire. The order went out and the Velcron fleet mobilized. Ships that had been patrolling other parts of the system turned and headed toward Earth. More ships jumped in from nearby star systems. Within hours, 60 Velcron warships were approaching the blue planet. It was enough firepower to destroy the entire surface of a world. It was enough to turn oceans into steam and continents into ash. The fleet spread out across Earth's orbital space. Each battle group positioned itself over a major population center. New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Tokyo, Mumbai. The largest human cities all had Velcron warships hovering above them, like bloody swords ready to fall. Zethrock prepared his ultimatum carefully. He wanted the words to be clear so the humans would understand they had no choice. He broadcast his message on every frequency the humans used. People of Earth, this is Commander Zethrock of the Velcron Empire. You have shown courage, but courage without wisdom is just foolishness. We have brought 60 warships to your world. Each one can destroy a city in minutes. You have one choice. Surrender now and accept Velcron rule, or we will begin orbital bombardment of every major population center. You have 1 hour to respond. The transmission ended and Zethrock waited. Surely the humans would see that continued resistance was suicide. Surely they would choose life even as slaves rather than death. President Martinez sat in the Situation Room with Admiral Coleman and her top advisors. They had all heard the Velcron ultimatum. They all knew what it meant. If they refused to surrender, billions of people would die. But if they accepted, then humanity would spend the rest of its existence in chains. Martinez looked around the table at the faces of the people she trusted most. What do we do? Admiral Coleman spoke first. We fight. Every factory on this planet has been converted to war production in the last 3 days. We have thousands of new missiles ready to launch. We have more kinetic platforms going up every hour. SpaceX and Blue Origin have been working around the clock. We have weapons the Velcron have not seen yet. The Secretary of Defense shook his head. But at what cost, Jack? They will kill billions. They will destroy our cities. How many people have to die before we accept that we cannot win? Coleman's voice was hard. All of them if necessary. Because if we surrender, our children and grandchildren will curse our memory. They will live as slaves and wish we had fought. I would rather die free than live in chains. Martinez closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were filled with determination. Draft a response. Make it clear. Make it strong. Let the Velcron know that humanity does not kneel. The response was broadcast 30 minutes later. Martinez spoke the words herself, and her voice carried to every corner of Earth and out into space where the Velcron fleet waited. Commander Zethrock, this is President Laura Martinez of the United Earth Government. You came to our world without permission. You destroyed our cities and murdered our people. You threatened our children and demanded our surrender. We have only one answer for you. Come and take it. Every man, woman, and child on this planet will fight you. We will make you pay for every inch of ground. We will hurt you in ways you cannot imagine. And if we die, then we die free. That is our answer. Zethrock listened to the human's response and felt something cold spread through his body. They were choosing death over submission. They were choosing to fight even though they knew they would lose. What kind of insane species did this? Begin orbital bombardment, he ordered quietly. Target all major cities. Show them what defiance costs. The Velcran warships opened fire. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking cities across the planet. Buildings exploded. Streets melted. Fires spread in every direction. Millions of humans died in the first minutes. The destruction was terrible and absolute, but the humans had been preparing for this moment. They had spent 3 days moving weapons and people. They had built underground shelters and hidden launch sites. They had scattered their military assets across the entire planet. And when the Velcran opened fire, Earth struck back with everything it had. Thousands of missiles rose from concealed locations. They came from forests and deserts and mountains. They launched from submarines deep in the ocean. The sky filled with white contrails as the missiles climbed toward space. New kinetic platforms that had been rushed into orbit released their deadly cargo. Modified tungsten rods fell toward the Velcran ships. Human fighter craft swarmed up from hidden airfields. They had been modified with crude energy weapons that scientists had reverse-engineered from pieces of the damaged Velcran cruiser. The weapons were weak compared to Velcran technology, but there were hundreds of fighters and they attacked in coordinated waves. The battle was chaos. Explosions lit up the sky. Velcran ships fired their weapons, constantly trying to hit the swarms of missiles and fighters. Some of the human weapons got through. Kinetic rounds slammed into Velcran hulls. Missiles detonated against weakened shields. Fighter craft strafed the larger ships with their energy weapons, doing small amounts of damage that added up. The fighting went on for 18 hours without stopping. Earth burned. Entire cities were reduced to radioactive craters. Coastal areas were flooded when energy beams boiled the oceans. 2 billion humans died in that terrible day and night. The planet's surface was scarred in ways that would take centuries to heal, but the humans made the Velcran pay for every death. 12 Velcran warships fell from orbit, trailing fire and debris. They crashed into oceans and deserts, leaving massive craters. 5 more ships were so badly damaged they had to withdraw. Their hulls were breached and their systems were failing. The proud Velcran fleet had been bloodied by the primitives they had come to conquer. When the fighting finally stopped, both sides were exhausted. The Velcran had lost nearly a third of their attack force. The humans had lost a quarter of their population. The planet below was wounded and burning. Smoke filled the atmosphere and blocked out the sun in many places. Zethrock looked at his casualties and felt something he had never experienced before. True fear. The humans were not breaking. They were not surrendering. Every loss just made them fight harder. He had killed billions of them and they kept coming. What would it take to make them stop? How many would he have to kill before they gave up? His tactical officer Vrektal approached with new reports. Commander, our remaining ships need time to repair. Our ammunition reserves are at 40%. Many of our crews are exhausted. I recommend we withdraw and regroup. Zethrock wanted to argue, but he knew Vrektal was right. Pull back to high orbit. Keep watch on the planet, but do not engage unless they attack first. I need to think about our next move. As the Velcran fleet withdrew to a safer distance, Zethrock stared at the scarred planet below. For 200 years, the Velcran had conquered everything they encountered. But these humans were different. These humans would rather burn their own world than surrender it. And for the first time in his long military career, Zethrock wondered if the Velcran Empire had finally found an enemy they could not defeat. Commander Greg Hayes gripped the controls of his fighter jet as he flew through what used to be downtown Tokyo. The city below was a wasteland of rubble and fire. Buildings that had stood for decades were now just twisted metal and broken concrete. Smoke rose in thick columns that blocked out the sun, but Hayes did not have time to think about the destruction. He had a mission to complete. His wingman, Lieutenant Amy Foster, stayed close behind him. Her voice came through his headset, sharp and focused. I have got 2 Velcran fighters on our 6. They are closing fast. Hayes banked hard to the left and dove between 2 burning skyscrapers. The Velcran fighters followed. Their ships were faster and more maneuverable, but Hayes had been flying in combat for 3 weeks now. He had learned their patterns. He knew their weaknesses. Break right on my mark, Hayes ordered. 3, 2, 1 mark. Both human fighters split apart. The Velcran pilots tried to follow, but they had to choose which target to pursue. One went after Hayes and the other chased Amy. It was exactly what Hayes wanted. He pulled his fighter into a tight loop that pushed him back in his seat. The G-forces made his vision narrow, but he fought through it. When he came out of the loop, he was behind the Velcran fighter that had been chasing him. Fox 3, Hayes said calmly and pressed the firing button. A missile streaked away from his fighter. It was one of the new plasma-tip designs that human engineers had created by studying captured Velcran technology. The missile hit the alien fighter's shield and burned through it. The Velcran ship exploded in a ball of orange fire. Amy's voice came through the radio. Got mine too. These new missiles are beautiful. Hayes allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 3 weeks ago, their missiles could barely scratch Velcran shields. Now they were punching through. Humanity was learning fast. Every battle taught them something new. Every captured piece of technology gave them new ideas. All fighters break off and return to base. A new voice commanded over the radio. This is Admiral Coleman. We have something new coming into play. Hayes checked his fuel gauge and saw he was running low anyway. Copy that, Admiral. All units returned to base. As the human fighters turned away from the battle, something massive appeared on Hayes's radar. It was coming from behind the moon, and it was huge, bigger than any ship humanity had built before. Hayes switched his display to visual and his eyes went wide. The ship was enormous. It looked like someone had taken a space station and turned it into a battleship. The hull was covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. Hayes had heard rumors about a secret construction project, but he had not believed it until now. This is the USS Defiance to all forces, a voice announced. We are going hot. Clear the firing lanes. Hayes pulled his fighter back and watched as the massive battleship moved into position. The Defiance had been built in secret over the past 3 weeks using the hull of an unfinished space station. Every resource humanity could spare had gone into its construction. Thousands of engineers and workers had labored around the clock to make it ready, and now it was here. The Defiance opened fire, and Hayes had never seen anything like it. The ship was armed with experimental railguns that used electromagnetic force to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. Each round was the size of a small car, and they moved at a significant fraction of light speed. When they hit Velcran shields, the shields simply ceased to exist. 3 Velcran destroyers were in the path of the Defiance's first salvo. The railgun rounds tore through their shields like they were not even there. The projectiles punched through armor and hull plating. They went completely through the ships and came out the other side. Internal explosions rippled through all 3 destroyers as their power cores lost containment. Within seconds, all 3 ships were breaking apart. Hayes let out a whoop of joy. Did you see that, Amy? We just killed 3 of their capital ships in one shot. I saw it, Amy replied, and her voice was filled with the same excitement. Maybe we can actually win this thing. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Commander Zethrock watched 3 of his destroyers die and felt his world collapsing around him. The humans had built a battleship. In 3 weeks, they had constructed a vessel that could match Velcran firepower. How was that possible? His people had taken decades to develop their current technology. These primitives were doing it in weeks. All ships concentrate fire on that human battleship, Zethrock ordered. Destroy it before it can fire again. 10 Velcran warships turned toward the Defiance and opened fire. Energy beams lanced across space. Missiles streaked toward the massive human vessel. The barrage was enough to destroy a small moon. But the Defiance did not die easily. The battleship's shields flared bright as they absorbed the incoming fire. Human engineers had studied Velcran shield technology and improved on it. They had made the shields stronger and more efficient. The Defiance shrugged off attacks that would have crippled a Velcran cruiser. The battleship fired again. More railgun rounds crossed the distance between ships in the blink of an eye. 2 more Velcran vessels took critical damage. One lost its main engines and began drifting. The other lost power completely and went dark. Zethrock could not believe what he was seeing. His fleet was being driven back. The unstoppable armada that had conquered 43 star systems was retreating from a single human ship. It was impossible, but it was happening. Brektal approached with his datapad and his voice was quiet. Commander, we have lost 15 ships since the battle began. Another 8 are too damaged to fight effectively. Our ammunition reserves are critically low. The humans are not stopping. Every day they have new weapons. Every battle they learn something new. I do not think we can win this, Zethrock wanted to argue. He wanted to order his ships to attack until the humans were destroyed. But he could see the truth in Brektal's words. They were losing. For the first time in 200 years, the Velcran Empire was losing a war. What kind of species are these humans? Zethrock asked quietly. Frektal pulled up information on his pad. I have been studying their history, Commander. Their entire evolution was defined by conflict. They are persistence predators. On their world, they would chase prey for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They never gave up. Their civilizations have been at war with each other for thousands of years. They have survived ice ages and plagues and natural disasters. They have even survived their own weapons of mass destruction. Commander, I do not think they know how to surrender. I think fighting is in their DNA. They would rather die than submit. Zethrock looked at Earth on his view screen. That small blue world had become his nightmare. He had killed billions of them and they kept fighting. He had burned their cities and they built new weapons. He had shown them the full might of the Velcron Empire and they had bloodied his fleet. What do we do? Zethrock asked. He had never felt so lost in his life. We leave, Rektal said simply. We retreat while we still have ships left. We tell the Empire that Earth is unconquerable. We warn other species to stay away from this system. The humans are too dangerous to fight. Zethrock's pride screamed at him to refuse. But his tactical mind knew Rektal was right. If they stayed, they would lose more ships. Eventually, the humans would destroy the entire fleet. Better to retreat now with some forces intact than to lose everything. Send a message to all remaining ships, Zethrock ordered. We are withdrawing from Earth space. Set course for the nearest Velcron outpost. Tell them we are coming in for repairs. As the order went out, the Velcron ships began to pull back. They moved slowly at first as if reluctant to admit defeat. Then faster as the human forces pressed their advantage. More missiles launched from Earth. More fighters swarmed up from hidden bases. The Defiance fired again and another Velcron ship died. The retreat became a rout. Velcron ships jumped to hyperspace as soon as they were clear of Earth's gravity well. They fled the system, leaving behind the wreckage of their defeated fleet. In less than an hour, the proud armada that had come to conquer Earth was gone. On Earth, people emerged from shelters and bunkers. They looked up at the sky and saw that the red Velcron ships were disappearing. Cheers erupted in every city. People hugged each other and cried. They had survived. Against all odds, they had driven off an enemy that had never been defeated. But the cost had been terrible. 3 billion people dead, dozens of cities destroyed, entire regions made uninhabitable by radiation. The planet would take generations to recover. The scars of this war would never fully heal. Admiral Coleman stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched the last Velcron ship vanish. He felt no joy, only exhaustion and grief for all the lives lost. Captain Monroe approached him. Sir, we are receiving transmissions from all over the planet. They want to know if it is over. They want to know if we won. Coleman thought about that question. Had they won? The enemy was gone, but the price had been so high. Was this what victory looked like? Tell them yes, Coleman said finally. Tell them the war is over. Tell them we survived. And tell them to start rebuilding because we have a lot of work to do. 6 months had passed since the last Velcron ship left Earth's orbit, and the world was still counting its dead. Admiral Jack Coleman stood in the rebuilt command center looking at reports from around the planet. The numbers were staggering. 3 billion people gone, 12 major cities completely destroyed, vast areas of land poisoned by radiation that would take decades to clean. The ocean levels had risen from the energy weapons boiling away billions of gallons of water. Entire coastlines had been reshaped by the war, but humanity had survived and, more importantly, they had won. The Velcron Empire had retreated for the first time in 200 years. Word of the defeat was spreading across the galaxy. Other species that the Velcron had conquered were hearing about the humans who refused to surrender. Hope was spreading to worlds that had forgotten what freedom felt like. President Martinez entered the command center looking tired, but determined. She had aged 10 years in the past 6 months. The weight of leading Earth through its darkest times showed on her face. But her eyes were still sharp and her voice was still strong. Admiral Coleman, we need to discuss our next steps. The Velcron may be gone, but they are still out there. They still control 43 star systems. We cannot just sit here and wait for them to come back with a bigger fleet. Coleman nodded. He had been thinking about the same thing. I agree, Madam President. We need to take the fight to them. Show them that Earth is not just defending itself anymore. Show them that we are a threat they need to worry about. Martinez sat down at the conference table and Coleman joined her. Other officials and military leaders filed in. Captain Lisa Monroe was there representing the Navy. Dr. Henry Kim came in carrying his ever-present tablet full of technical data. Commander Greg Hayes and Lieutenant Amy Foster were there as well, both of them having been promoted for their actions during the war. Martinez spoke first. We have been analyzing the Velcran navigation database that we recovered from one of their destroyed ships. Dr. Kim, can you explain what you found? Dr. Kim stood and activated a holographic display. The image showed a map of nearby star systems with colored markers indicating Velcran territory. There are 43 conquered systems, all within 200 light-years of Earth. Each system has a Velcran occupation force and a slave population of native species. Some of these species have been under Velcran control for over a century. They have forgotten what freedom looks like. What are you suggesting? One of the generals asked. Coleman stood and looked around the table. I am suggesting that we do what humans have always done when we see injustice. We fight it. We go to these systems and we liberate them. We show these enslaved species that the Velcran can be beaten. We give them their freedom back. The room was silent for a moment. Then Captain Monroe spoke up. Sir, we barely survived fighting the Velcran on our home ground. You want us to take the war to them? To fight them in their own territory? Hayes leaned forward. With all due respect, Captain, I think that is exactly what we should do. The Velcran are afraid of us now. They have never been defeated before. If we hit them now while they are still in shock, we can do real damage. We can free billions of people. Amy Foster nodded. I agree. Every day we wait, the Velcran will rebuild their strength. They will study what we did and find ways to counter it. If we are going to do this, we need to do it now. Martinez looked at Coleman. What would this mission look like? How many ships would we need? Coleman pulled up his own tactical display. We have been building new ships since the day the Velcran left. The Defiance proved that we can match their technology. We now have 15 heavy battleships, 30 cruisers, and over 100 smaller vessels. We have reverse-engineered Velcran hyperspace drives so we can reach distant systems. We have trained 50,000 soldiers and pilots specifically for offensive operations. We are ready, Madam President. What about Earth's defenses? Someone asked. If we send our fleet away, what happens if the Velcran come back? Dr. Kim answered that question. We have built a network of orbital defense platforms. Each one is armed with railguns and missile batteries. We have underground bunkers and hidden launch sites all over the planet. Earth can defend itself now. We do not need the entire fleet here. Martinez thought for a long moment. She looked at each person around the table. These were the people who had saved humanity. These were the ones who had stood against impossible odds and won. If they believed this was the right move, then she trusted their judgment. I am authorizing a liberation fleet, Martinez said. 50 ships under Admiral Coleman's command. Your mission is to free the species enslaved by the Velcran Empire. Show them that their oppressors can be defeated. Bring them hope. But Admiral, do not take unnecessary risks. If you encounter overwhelming force, you retreat. We did not survive the invasion just to throw away lives on a suicide mission. Coleman saluted. Understood, Madam President. We will bring freedom to the galaxy. The word spread quickly, and within hours, thousands of people were volunteering for the mission. Soldiers who had fought in the defense of Earth wanted to continue the fight. Engineers and doctors signed up to help rebuild the worlds they would liberate. Even civilians volunteered to join colony ships that would help the freed species get back on their feet. Hayes and Amy both volunteered immediately. They would lead fighter squadrons from the battleship that Coleman would use as his flagship. Captain Monroe would command a cruiser group. Dr. Kim would go along to study alien technology and find ways to improve human systems. 2 weeks later, the Liberation Fleet departed from Earth orbit. 50 warships carrying humanity's best and brightest. Their destination was a star system called Tharlix Prime, one of the first systems the Velcran had conquered nearly 200 years ago. Intelligence suggested the Velcran garrison there was small, since they had never expected any resistance. The journey took 3 weeks through hyperspace. When they arrived in the Tharlix system, they found exactly what the intelligence had predicted. A single Velcran battle station orbiting the main planet, 5 cruisers patrolling the system, maybe 1,000 Velcran soldiers on the ground keeping the native population enslaved. The Tharlix themselves were a gentle species that had never developed weapons more advanced than simple firearms. They had surrendered quickly when the Velcran arrived and had lived under occupation ever since. Their cities were now factories producing goods for the Velcran Empire. Their children were taken and trained as servants. Their elders remembered freedom, but the younger generation had only known slavery. Coleman gave the order and the human fleet attacked. The Velcron were caught completely by surprise. They had grown comfortable in their occupation. They never imagined anyone would come to challenge them. The battle was over in less than an hour. The battle station was destroyed. 4 of the cruisers were disabled, and the 5th escaped to carry word back to the Empire. Human soldiers landed on Tharlix Prime and fought the Velcron garrison. The fight was brutal but short. The Velcron were warriors, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Within a day, the planet was free. The Tharlix people emerged from their homes cautiously at first. They had lived in fear for so long they did not know how to process what was happening. Then they saw the Velcron flags coming down, and human soldiers helping rebuild damaged buildings. They saw doctors treating their sick and engineers repairing their infrastructure. They realized that these humans had come to help, not to conquer. An old Tharlix leader approached Coleman with tears in his eyes. He was missing one arm, taken by the Velcron as punishment years ago. His name was Elder Thren, and he had led resistance efforts until the Velcron crushed his movement. "Why did you come?" Thren asked. "Why do you risk your lives for us? You do not even know us." Coleman thought about all the humans who had died defending Earth. He thought about the cities that had burned and the children who had lost their parents. He thought about what it meant to be human, because freedom is worth fighting for, Coleman said. Because no one deserves to live in chains. Because when we see evil, we cannot just look away. That is what makes us human. We fight for what is right even when it is hard. Even when it costs us. We fight because someone has to. Thren embraced Coleman and wept. Around them, the Tharlix people began to celebrate. For the first time in 2 centuries, they were free, and they knew they owed that freedom to the humans who had crossed the stars to help them. The liberation of Tharlix Prime was just the beginning. Over the next 2 years, the human fleet would free 15 more systems. They would face larger Velcron forces and harder battles. They would lose ships and brave soldiers, but they would never stop. They would never surrender. They would show the galaxy that the age of Velcron domination was over, and across the star species that had forgotten hope began to remember. They heard stories of the humans who refused to kneel. They learned about the species that had defeated the undefeatable. They started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could be free too. Commander Zethrock received the reports from Tharlix Prime and knew his worst fears had come true. The humans were not just defending themselves anymore. They were coming for the Empire. They were taking back everything the Velcron had built, and he knew in his heart that nothing would stop them. The Velcron had ruled through fear for 2 centuries. Now they had finally